Hey one, hey all, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Monday. Do you fancy we have a countdown? Yeah, sure, why not? Because that's what we do around here on Mondays. Last week we looked at, as voted on by fans all across social media, the top 10 worst or most ineffective, if you will, mold reuses in Transformers. And the voting was wild and woolly. Well, it only seemed fair that this week, we look at, again, as voted on by fans, the top 10 mold reuses, the best ones, the most successful ones, but not the obvious ones. I'll explain what I mean as we hop into the latest GotBot Counts Down. Hey one, hey all, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, your most humble of hosts, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot. As always, man, please like, comment, share, of course, subscribe, and while you're at it, line 'em up, baby. And hit that notification bell, please. It helps me out a ton, and it lets you know when content of all sorts goes up here on the channel. Check out Machinery of Man, the Everything Factor, all the groups that I'm either a mod or an admin for, as well as all of my social media links. All of that's in the description down below, also in the description down below. And if you are in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link. You can check us out on Patreon. You can see what we offer to you through Teespring, or of course you can hit the join button right here on YouTube and become a channel member. And this is, like I said, the top 10 best mold reuses as voted on by fans. It's not to say it's definitive. I'm sure that there are obviously other objective metrics that we could use to measure that success rate, but this is as voted on, of course, by fans. Now, a couple of caveats. I did not include votes for the Seekers because the Seekers are the most popular mold reuse. There's so many of them that have that same body type. It would have been a clear win for like the Starscream mold. It's too obvious. The same went for, say, the traditional Datsun trio of Prowl, Smokescreen, and Blue Streak, because again, they just share the same body type anyway. It's always been that way. It's just too obvious. And the same went for the Lambo. I said trio. A lot of people will say bros, but I say trio. Well, I can't even say trio. When I say the Lambo reuse, I'm really talking about Sideswipe and Red Alert because of those two. Now, I did count if somebody said, for example, Siege Deep Cover, right? Or Selects, I guess it is, Netflix, whatever, Deep Cover, because that's a repaint from that Sideswipe. That's, I'll say, not quite as known, you know, so there was a little bit of judgment here, so to speak, but the ones that would be the most, say, obvious uses and, I guess, like reuses of molds, I tried to steer clear from because they'd be too obvious. We would expect those, you know, so these were ones we didn't quite expect. Luckily, in the actual voting, I didn't have to deal with the Lambo issue, really. There were, say, a couple of votes for Sideswipe. That's it. I was okay with the mold reuses. I didn't, a bunch of people voted for Seekers, despite in the picture and in the post, me saying twice that the Seekers didn't count. It's too obvious. We know that they would be number one, right? So those kind of are the caveats. So with those caveats in mind, realizing that this is fan voted, what about the honorable mentions? Now I'm going to apologize here. There are 8 honorable mentions, and I'm going to go through them super quick actually. Why are there 8? Because all of them had the exact same number of votes. I can't really count 2 or 3 of these as honorable mentions without the rest because the votes were the exact same. So that's how close the voting has been. As for the 8, we have Titan's Return. Hold on. I have to find it here now. Titan's Return Sky Shadow, as well as Overlord, which are the same mold. Which came first? I think it was Sky Shadow that came first. But that general mold between the two of them, as well as Fort Max from Metroplex, even though there was a lot of remolding there. I did say, hey, we can count that one because the arms and the legs and stuff are the same. It was a heavy retool, right? Nautica from the Blur mold, from Titan's Return Blur. Rotor Storm from Spinister. Siege Crosshairs, who I thought was going to make it. Siege Crosshairs from Siege Ironhide, Titan's Return, Megatron, and the Selects Nightbird from Chromia. So none of those made the list. All of them admirable mold reuses. Most successful, I don't know if the Nightbird was, only because I don't think that mold was good to begin with. But none of them made it. And maybe you disagree. Maybe you think some of those were the worst mold reuses. But they did get votes for this list. So, and they got enough that they were able to make the honorable mention. Since none of them made the list, well, who did? You know what we're going to do, man. We're going to do what we always do here on Mondays. And we're going to start things off with number 10. Burst. Number 10 is a tie. Yeah, I told you, man. The voting was close. What's the tie? The tie is, well, these two. That's right, it is Ectotron first. That's quite the retool and reuse of the, say, Onslaught, Combiner Wars, Hotshot, Power of the Primes Inferno mold. Like, it's a reuse of that one with definitely some new parts, and enough new parts that it really feels like its own thing, even though it shares that engineering with those earlier molds. Then the other one, of course, is Cybertron Defense Hotshot. Now, he also made the list for, or an honorable mention at least. He got votes. Let's put it that way. He got votes for the worst mold reuse list. I think if you are a huge fan of Cybertron Defense Hotshot, you might not have been happy with this use because it is somewhat stylized, and I get it. However, for somebody like me, who's not a fan of Unicron Trilogy and kind of has a passing knowledge and interest of the character, I think it was successful, and enough fans felt the same way that both of these guys were able to jointly take the number 10 slot. Number 9 is one that a lot of people have. I don't yet as of this recording, but I love the base mold for it, and it's this guy. Yeah, buddy, it is the Golden Disc Pterosaur. Look, I realize from what I've heard that apparently there's some issues with his ankles being slightly loose. Apparently the right wing tends to pop off from what I've heard. I don't have mine in hand. I can't speak to it. But here's what I can say. The last time we had a Pterosaur, it was the original. And if you wanted it to be somewhat animation accurate, either you had to customize it, as I did, or you had to get, say, the Japanese iteration. And it was basic, so it was small. It was about the size of a Legends. Pterosaur was a bigger lad, right? He was bigger than Scorponok. Taller, anyway, than Scorponok. I can't really say bigger, but taller than Scorponok. And I think a lot of people wanted that original animation accuracy overflow into plastic form. And it never really happened until now. Arguably, some might say that the Combiner Wars mold that was used was a more proper version, but that turned into a plane, so it is what it is. I love the Air Razor mold from the Kingdom line. I'm excited to get it as Pterosaur, and I think it's the right size. That's the big thing. Because fans have waited so long, because he has the right coloration, really, and because overall the mold is good, even if there's a loose wing issue, enough fans love the look of the guy, have waited so long for a proper representation of the character, that this mold reuse was able to take the number 9 slot. Now, number 8 came as a surprise to me, because I reviewed it, it wasn't for me, but I won't lie that it is a true blue leader and an interesting mold reuse, and it's this guy. Yes, sir, it is the Galaxy Upgrade Optimus Prime from Siege. The Cybertron Optimus Prime is cool. This one is neat. It's a true leader. It's definitely the more cost-effective way to go than going back and getting the original Cybertron, even though the original Cybertron was leaps and bounds ahead of its time. I don't have any real strong feelings for or against this Optimus Prime. Here's what I can say. If you're cool with the parts forming aspect of it, it's all right. The base Optimus Prime, nothing wrong with it. It's a fine Voyager Optimus Prime. The upgrade version, again, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't have a connection to that version of Optimus Prime. But for anybody who does like Unicron Trilogy, or for anybody who doesn't have that original, this was an interesting and I would say effective mold reuse, because whether this is the Optimus for you or not, there's no doubting who it is meant to homage. And overall, when the parts all go together, they do work, and they are pretty solid. It's hard to argue with a mold reuse that actually does work and does pay homage to the character it's intended to. Whether you think it surpasses the original or not is irrelevant, because that's not what the topic of debate is for this list. Was this a good mold reuse of Siege Ultra Magnus? Absolutely. And the fans felt the same way, and this guy was able to take the number 8 slot. Number 7 is a personal favorite of mine. He had votes for the worst list, and it's this guy. Titans Return Brainstorm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Look, I actually got that guy. I had him come from the US because at the time I didn't think he was getting released here, and I don't think he ever did. I don't think he ever came to Canada, not to my recollection. I could be wrong about that. Maybe he showed up at some point at EB Games/GameStop, but not to my knowledge. Somebody can correct me on that. As far as I know, if you didn't order it from the US, you weren't getting him. I realize there's been the reissue thing. That may have came out in Canada. I haven't seen it in my neck of the woods. So I'm glad I got Brainstorm when I did. He was a little more expensive than I'd like because of the shipping, but you know what? I'm happy with that Brainstorm. By the way, the Voyager Brainstorm also never ever came here. So we've never had Brainstorm in my neck of the woods. I thought that the mold worked very well for Brainstorm with minimal remolding. That being said, not everybody agrees, and a lot of people felt like it wasn't a very good use. For me, I look at the vehicle and think, yeah, that's kind of his weird flying mode. I look at the robot and think, yeah, that's the Brainstorm that I remember, really as a lad. When the homage succeeds as robot and the homage succeeds as vehicle, it's hard to argue with it, man. I support the voting here, and this guy took the number 7 slot. Now, number 6 was real interesting, and it's this guy. Well, it's kind of that guy. So, obviously, I used a image there of the Powermaster Optimus Prime from the Titans Return line, and of course that's a reuse and remold of the fantastic Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. Some of the votes that came in came for Super Ginrai. A couple came for Magnus Prime that was in that box set, and I get that. The reason I used the Powermaster Optimus Prime is because while all those molds are kind of related and they're all reuses and remolds of Ultra Magnus, most of the votes were for the Hasbro Powermaster Optimus Prime release. It's the one that stood out above the others. So that's why I chose to use that one. Look, I loved it as Magnus. I thought it was a pretty darn effective Powermaster Optimus Prime. I think it's a great Super Ginrai / Magnus Prime. And you know what? It's the one that I use as my God Ginrai or God Jinrai, depending on how you pronounce it. Happy with it as Ultra Magnus. It's still my Ultra Magnus of choice. It's still my God Ginrai of choice. You know what? I can't argue with the success rate, man, all these years later. And for that reason, and according to the votes, this guy takes the number 6 slot. And here we are. Oh, buddy, here we are at the most coveted of locations. You know where we are. Shh. We're at that halfway mark. And at the halfway mark, we have a very unexpected entry. I'm happy that this entry is here. And it's this character. Now, hear me out. I know what you're saying. Power of the Prime's Elita 1. What? We all know that the Starscream was kind of considered to be a trash mold, and a lot of people don't like the Power of the Prime's Elita 1. However, it was really the first true Elita 1 that came out in the main line. Her size and kind of Amazonian styling and heft really made her feel like the leader of a group. Because her group is sort of intact, and we have all of those characters, it's neat that they had the combining gimmick. Insofar as it's neat that the Dinobots combined. Either you're behind these made-up combiners or you're not. Nevertheless, it is a piece of the functionality that should be mentioned. And right now, as of this recording, She was a mold reuse of Starscream, and the only other Elita that we have is a mold reuse of RC. In general, people think that the Starscream, as much as it wasn't good, they think it worked better than people think the RC mold worked, if that makes sense. In other words, Elita 1 is, the Power of the Primes Elita 1 is still kind of considered by many of the voters as the current best Elita 1 we have. Not to say they can't do better. I'm sure they could. I like her. I am happy with her. I'm hard pressed to replace her. And enough fans felt the same way that she took the number 5 slot. Number 4. Number 4, man, takes us out of G1, which I kind of like, and takes us into RID with this guy. That's right, it's Scourge, which of course we all know is like a black Nemesis Primey version of the Laser Prime mold, right? Even the original was a reuse of the original Laser Prime. It was a, look, the Laser Prime was fantastic. I'm sure that the Legacy Laser Prime is going to get redecoed into that version of Scourge. And you know what? Honestly, that looks like it's going to be tremendous. It's not a body type that speaks to me, but I'm so happy to see that version kind of getting a bit of love again, because I know there's so many fans that have wanted a proper update to Scourge for a long time, and I think it's going to come in Legacy. It gotta come in Legacy, right? Enough fans felt the same way, hope the same way, that this guy was able to take the number 4 slot. Oh man, here we are at the top 3, and at number 3 we go back a few years to this guy. Thrilling 30 Sandstorm, baby. Look, I love the Springer mold, and I wasn't gonna get the Sandstorm. I really wasn't. And Starscream wife saw him and thought, at the time I think she was, I don't even know if she was Starscream girlfriend then. At the time she might have just been Starscream friend. I'm not sure. But Starscream wife saw him and said, he looks really cool, you should get him. And I was like, I don't think. She's like, no man, get him. Like, he looks really cool. I got him, and you know what? I love him. I get it. It's stylized from the G1 because he has the VTOLs instead of being a helicopter and whatnot. But the mold is so strong and so good as Springer and as this guy that's hard to argue with it. Even now, some 9 years later, it's still a standout, fantastic mold and a standout, fantastic mold reuse. And enough fans felt the same way that old Sandstorm took the number 3 slot. Number 2 takes us to collaboratives, and actually a mold reuse that a lot of people obviously love, but that I detested, and it's this guy. Yeah, man, it's Gigawatt. He makes a cool looking DeLorean, and I said when I did the review, if you want to just get him and leave him in DeLorean mode, he's a neat DeLorean. For $60 Canadian for a deluxe, wasn't for me. I wasn't impressed. I felt like there were a lot of tolerance issues during the transformation, especially like flipping his chest piece over. A lot of people love him though. I don't get it. I don't get it. And I think it's his legs, I think it's his knee is really limited. That being said, I wasn't a huge fan of the Siege side swipe mold anyway. It's all right. It's okay. It functions okay. But the feet always felt really tight to me on it. I kind of like the Earth mode version a bit better. Feels like its tolerance a bit better. I digress. Regardless of what I think enough fans love the look of that robot, love the look of him as a DeLorean, that old Gigawatt was able to take the number 2 slot. And here we are at the top spot, number 1. And man, do I ever agree with this mold reuse. I didn't even get the original. I didn't care to get the original. But number 1, man, to this day still blows me away. In fact, it was not in 2022, maybe in 2021, maybe in 2020. I don't remember which year now, but he was a former number 1 for the whole year. And it's this guy. Yeah, man, I can't argue with it. The Super Megatron, the Select Super Megatron is still my favorite Megatron. I love the mold. It's so versatile. You can configure parts in so many ways to make the tank look the way you want, to make the plane look the way you want. I never got the Galvatron. I didn't care for it. I didn't like it. Just the things you can do to change the Super Megatron's face around and the band on his forehead and stuff. It's endless things to discover with him. They took what was, by many accounts and considered by many fans to be a pretty lackluster mold, and turned it into an absolute gem. They took, pardon the expression, they took the turd that was Titans Return Galvatron and shined it up real nice to turn it into an absolute diamond in the rough. And that's how you spell success when you're talking about a mold reuse and a mold retool. Number one, Super Megatron. I 100% support it. And there you have it, folks. We've gone from 10 down to 1 once again. And there were a lot of other ones that got votes. Titans Return Sentinel Prime, as well as Titans Return Astro Train, because technically Astro Train came out after Sentinel Prime. Although a lot of people said the Astro Train was planned first and Sentinel Prime was the reuse. I get both votes. The recent Beast Wars Grimlock, as well as the original Beast Wars Grimlock from Dinobot. Oh, I like this one. The Fracture that was released, that was a reuse of the Chug, I don't know if it was Classics or Universe, version of Mirage. And I think that came out as a movie offering, maybe a Walmart exclusive. We also had, let's see who else we had here. Ricochet from Jazz, both G1 and Power of the Primes. War for Cybertron Barricade, specifically the Siege version, because it's not one of the usual Datsuns. Who else did we have? Shatterglass Jetfire from the Siege Jetfire. The Star Convoy from the Power of the Primes, Leader Class Optimus Prime. The Punch Counter Punch from the Classics Universe Sideswipe mold had some votes. And just to kind of end things off, the Thrilling 30 Dreadwing, which was a reuse, of course, of the Stealth Bomber Megatron. So there you have it. That's all of them. 10 down to 1. It was an interesting list, a fun list. I did include retools here because it sort of expanded to include them for the worst list, so it only seemed fair to do it for the best list. Anyway, let me know if your favorites made it or what your favorites are. I appreciate you guys coming by, giving me some of your extremely valuable time. I do know how important it is to you. If you're in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link. You can check us out on Patreon. You can see what we have to offer to you through Teespring, or of course you can hit the join button right here on YouTube and become a channel member. While you're at it, hit the subscribe button, stick around, have some fun with us, and especially don't forget that somehow, someway, each and every single day, you right there, you do make a difference, man. And I look forward to the next time that you and I get together to have another visit, either in the live streams on Thursday nights at the stop motion premieres or the old-fashioned way right here inside the videos.